Hello, Whale fam. Welcome to a very special Whale FM project showcase with the Animoca brand. We're going to be covering the whole Animoca universe. And here with us today is Yat and Matt from the team. Yat being the founder and Walt Disney version of the NFT space. Welcome, you guys. How you doing?
Great. Thank you for having us. It's a real honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you guys.
It's definitely been a long time coming. You guys have done so much in the NFT and just collectible space in general that it's definitely our pleasure to show what you guys have been working on and where you kind of came from to our community, so they can also learn more about all the amazing projects and IP and everything Animoca related. So definitely our pleasure to have you here today. Um, yeah,
Great.
if you want to kick it off,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit. Well, first, I'd like to know a little bit about you, right?
Sure. Okay, no problem.
I don't think you get enough credit. So let's hear about a little bit about your story and how it built
Right.
up to
So,
this.
absolutely. Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to introduce ourselves to the whale community. And first off, I have to say that, this community is perhaps one of the most impressive communities in the NFT crypto space that we've had the pleasure to present to. So thank you for that. For a little bit, I guess, of my background. So, obviously, yeah, I'm chairman and co-founder of Animoca Brands. My story is perhaps a little bit unusual in the sense that although I am ethnically Chinese, I actually grew up in Austria to a family of musicians. So I'm originally a trained classical musician, and my parents were both professional musicians, so I didn't have a choice. It was basically sort of my fate. But it's because of my forced sort of labor into music that I ended up using the computer to help me out. Actually, in the 80s, I had an Atari ST, and it had a MIDI port, and I was able to essentially get an advantage because I wasn't as skilled in music as my fellow other colleagues by composition, because I could just play on a keyboard and the sort of notes would come out from the MIDI keyboard, but I had to software code it myself. And I gave myself a competitive advantage by essentially coding MIDI software, which was one of the first ones. This was in the 80s. And that software I ended up putting up on the bulletin board system, which is sort of FidoNet, and then later on Genie and CompuServe. And these bulletin board systems is how we used to communicate, like pre-internet. And what you usually used to do back then is when you put in the end of the software, like a credit, sort of the shareware, you would say, oh, if you like the software, go and send $10 or $20. I wasn't expecting any money. It was just like, kid bragging rights to say, hey, I got to do this. And then 2 months later, I started getting checks in the mail, and I didn't have a bank account. So that was kind of the beginning of my sort of journey into technology, through kind of a serendipitous approach. Yeah, and then it's just moving forward. That's how Atari discovered me. So I started working for Atari, and that led me to a journey ultimately into, back into Hong Kong, although I'd never really lived here, where I ended up starting one of the very first internet service providers in 1993 called Hong Kong Online. So the early days of internet. And when I look back today, I would say that was kind of crazy to set up an ISP in Hong Kong, because the whole world had maybe 30,000 internet users. So it wasn't
Wow.
a business idea. But I really believed in it. I was very passionate about that. And I remember actually the way I got to Hong Kong was I had built a business together with 6 other guys that was ultimately building something called VRML. This was in 91, 92. And for those who don't remember VRML, maybe most of you are too young, it stood for Virtual Reality Markup Language. And it basically was a version of HTML, but for VR. But the graphics were line graphics. I mean, it was basically like Tron. So there was nothing beautiful about it, but we all imagined we would go sort of shopping e-commerce in sort of VR with line graphics in 91, 92. So that didn't pan out back then. It was a bit too early, but that was sort of, I guess a little bit of sort of how we sort of kept experimenting in the early pre-internet and then internet era. And anyway, many things led to it. I'm not going to go through my whole history, but maybe I'll fast forward a little bit and sort of how we got into NFTs And the story started. So we started a cloud computing business in 1998, which at the time wasn't called cloud computing. Sold it to IBM, and in 2009, when we sold it, we were not allowed to go into enterprise business. When you sell a business, you have a non-compete. So for 3 years, we could not go into that. So we went back into consumer, and I went back into gaming, which was my original roots, back with Atari. And through that, I ended up sort of investing and building mobile game companies and so on, and products, and we were fairly successful. And one of the companies that we first invested in and ultimately acquired was a company in Vancouver called Fuel Powered. Its co-founder was a fellow called Mick Nayem, who happened to also be high school friends of Roham, who, of course, we all know today is CEO and co-founder of Dapper Labs. And they were actually sharing an office. And Axiom Zen, which was Roham's company, was building sort of with Dieter was sort of constructing this sort of NFT standard with ERC 721, and they needed someone to help build sort of that and think about the design elements of CryptoKitties, what would be eventually CryptoKitties. And so this is where Mick was, and they were sharing an office and doing that. And this was all in the process while we were in the middle of negotiating an acquisition of Mick's company. Nobody thought that this was going to explode the way that it did in late 2017, but of course it did. And that kind of changed the way that we structured our acquisition of Fuel Powered, because Mick ultimately, although he had agreed originally to join us, was offered a position as a co-founder and chief business development officer, or chief business officer of what would eventually become Dapper Labs. And in that agreement, we basically said, okay, well, this is like, we thought right now this is going to change the world. NFTs, this is incredible what CryptoKitties has demonstrated. So we're going to allow you to basically go and sort of fulfill that, but you must let us be involved in your business, and you need us to be publishers of CryptoKitties. And before Dapper Labs was even formed, we signed a deal with Axiom Zen to publish CryptoKitties in our part of the world, and ultimately would lead to a sort of a great relationship and us being investors.
I remember that day.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yes. So it was amazing. So that was sort of drove us into that mission. So that was it's been pretty wild.
So sounds like you've been first in just about every major human development in history. That must be great. To have that foresight is and now leader of Animoca. Anyone that works, with you, for you, definitely, I'm sure is passionate, because just, everything that you've accomplished and have the foresight to see already must feel pretty good.
I think, yes. And before I move on to some of the slides and sort of thinking of Animoca Brands, I think what we're witnessing right now in terms of Animoca Brands and the execution and vision for non-fungible tokens and the future of what I think NFTs will drive is a culmination of just various life experiences, right? I mean, various life experiences from pre-internet to internet, to sort of the early days of setting up cloud computing, through sort of, playing games and being involved in the gaming business, right? All of these elements added up together. So when, we saw NFTs and CryptoKitties, sort of the penny just dropped, and we're just like, holy shit, this is amazing. but it needed, I think, all that prehistory and that moment to happen for sort of that serendipitous connection to come together, for it to say, okay, this is something that is truly game changing.
I can imagine. It's kind of like the path, right? You've been on this path since you started and just didn't really know it yet. Matt is here with us from your team. He was telling me a little bit before backstage that he's fairly new to the space and all that. But Matt, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself briefly before we get into some slides, and how it's been so far to be a part of Animoca.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I am very new to the space. I joined Animoca in October last year. And prior to that, I had quite a long career in motorsport. I raced at a sort of semi-professional level for sort of the better part of about 11 years, for everything from go-karts to Formula 4 to GT3, so eventually Formula 3, where I raced with a lot of the top drivers that you see in Formula 1 now, the likes of Charles Leclerc, Antonio Giovinazzi, Lance Stroll. So it was an incredible year when I got that chance to race in Europe in F3. So fast forward, I'm now here at Animoca, and yeah, just loving every minute of it, and helping out on the Rev Motorsport project and F1 Delta Time.
Great.
Awesome.
And
Yep.
I think we also have Sean who just joined us. Yeah.
Yes, Sean, welcome. You can unmute yourself and tell us a little about your role in Animoca.
Sure. Thank you for letting me tag along. I won't keep everyone up too long with a run through of stuff because there's obviously a whole bunch of stuff to jump in. But yeah, essentially, like I kind of manage what we do with Rev Motorsport primarily, as well as like a bunch of other stuff that we kind of do with Animoca within and around blockchain stuff. So, like basically that means working with what we're doing with F1 Delta Time, with GP Ignition, with Rev, and then kind of like how we're, doing some other cool stuff with a bunch of the other initiatives that we've been watching recently, stuff like around how we're doing with gaming and things like that. So I'm mostly hands-on with what we do with Rev Motorsport, but definitely kind of where I can help, where I can be involved with everything else that we're doing there as well. But yeah, I won't hold it up too much because there's way more interesting stuff to talk about than just going through my stuff. So.
No. You guys make this up, and it wouldn't be possible without all of you putting in some amazing effort. All right, yeah. Well, what do you got for us? It's nothing short, so let's go.
It's I'll quickly go into this, but maybe just quickly, Sean, don't undersell yourself. Sean has been in the gaming business for 15 or 20 years. How long have you been being in games?
15, 16. Yes. What is it? 16 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yes. Before he joined, actually, what was the precursor of Animoca? Before he joined us, you were with IDOS, right? Which is
with Rare. So I was with Rare. So Rare was IDOS kind of came out of it. So yeah, it's kind of like I was with Rare in the UK, and basically like the stuff that I worked on prior to coming over to Hong Kong was the Xbox 360 launch, which seems like a long time ago. Before I ended up going, we were actually working on the early versions of Kinect, before obviously that got shelved not too long ago actually, but that early version prototypes and stuff of that stuff, which is very, very cool. So yeah, like my stuff comes, like my background has been games, right? Which is, I don't know, I guess kind of like with such kind of a deep-rooted connection with games. I mean, it's not like Yat's already mentioned this, but I think like one of the things that is definitely true with this stuff that we're doing is obviously like when we're building our experiences for blockchain and stuff, like gaming and games and that entertainment and like all those concepts and reasons why people play games, that's like very, very deeply rooted in like basically the blood of what everybody's working on, like everybody who's at Animoca at the moment, right? It's like we're all kind of gamers at heart and we all want to play the best games and make great games. So like tied to what we've been doing like from the technology side, how we've been kind of looking at how we can tap into finance and DeFi and kind of all these concepts that come through crypto and basically non-fungibles and the rest of it. Ultimately, it's kind of, okay, how can we do this in a way that is kind of entertaining, it's fun, is something that people want to play as well. So it's kind of, there's a deep through line that exists right now at the core with like how we want that kind of game entertainment like experience. And kind of that's how we look in a good chunk at what we can do with kind of blockchain and stuff.
Great. Thanks.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess it's just as interesting as the company itself.
Yat is definitely a prolific collector of great companies and teams, it seems.
Thank you. Right. So maybe what I'll do is I'll put like a quick presentation here that we prepared for the whale community, just to introduce Animoca Brands, our vision, and our thinking around everything. And I think this is just so you understand. So I'll start off with this slide that I hope you can see. Our tagline is that we call ourselves a global company that is changing the future of how we live, play, and work. And so, while on the surface, we definitely are very much in entertainment and gaming, we think what we're delivering is so much more, in the sense that, the future of NFTs is, of course, much more than just playing games or collectibles. We think fundamentally it can just change the way we live, play, and work. The initial goal for us was to disrupt the $150 billion game industry, which in and of itself is larger than music and film combined, and is the only sort of entertainment business that continues to grow by sort of 8, 10, or in some cases 15% per year. But we still think that's a very small number in comparison to where it could be. And we think this will change because there are 2.7 billion gamers today. And we think that the most obvious candidate to be delivering them this new asset class, these property rights, through NFTs, by delivering play-to-earn economies. In other words, you play a game, you actually live in this sort of metaverse or virtual world, and the time you spend, the value you generate is actually truly yours, and you can monetize it. In other words, a capital class that gives opportunities to people today. And I'll get into that a little later. If we succeed in doing that, we then will be one of the main companies that can help drive mass adoption to blockchain, which we think is critical to sort of the long-term success of what we're trying to build. And today we have actually 15 million users across all of our games. Most of them are not on blockchain. And part of our goal, of course, is to ultimately move all of our gamers into blockchain. So we're experimenting with this, with different approaches, and that is one of our key strategies here. Now, where we're also a little bit different here compared to other traditional, sort of developer studios, is that we have had a long history of investments in the space. And there's a little bit of background to this. Back in 2010 and 2011, we were one of the first mobile game companies actually that came out. And we had hits like Stargirl and Pretty Pet Salon. And sort of, Sean may sort of chuckle and remember those days, because actually we were amongst the top 5 or 10 mobile game companies in the world back then. And we had an opportunity to actually invest in many of our friends in the mobile game industry. That was kind of similar to sort of how NFTs were maybe even just a year or two ago. But at the time we were VC funded. So we had funding from Intel and IDG and Excel. And the general thinking around those VCs was, don't enable your competitors, kill them, right? Which of course was something that, in hindsight was a mistake. But at the time, of course, it seemed like the sort of typical strategy, zero-sum game, you have to win, you have to monopolize, all that kind of stuff. We took their money, so we had to basically try to sort of make money from them. And it was a mistake, right? Because one, we weren't comfortable developing actually in that kind of framework. And two, as it turned out, specifically in the gaming industry, it was big enough for many winners, right? And in fact, I think actually, as the industry grew, theoretically, we all should be growing better. But the framework of gaming didn't really allow for that because of the walled garden approach. Gaming became a zero-sum game, like everything in Web 1 and Web 2. But with NFTs, that changed. And we think that, we decided to make investments across the entire ecosystem. And it was funny because in 2018 and 2019, when we made investments in like OpenSea and Axie Infinity and Wax, and Dapper Labs, first of all, it was really difficult to raise money for them at the time. And in some cases, we were the only people putting money into them because nobody wanted to put money into NFTs. You've got to remember in 2018, at the end of it, it was bear market crypto. And then on top of it, it was bear market crypto. And then you wanted to invest in this thing nobody heard of, which was NFTs. So that was kind of, so we were trying to seed the ecosystem. And today, actually, we now have over 50 investments in the space. And we can maybe discuss a little later as to sort of why we did that. But the main thing is just to help seed and grow the ecosystem. The emphasis around why we're focusing on gamers, of course, the obvious narrative that everyone here already knows is you have true digital ownership and all that kind of stuff. But it's to think that the asset ownership, the security and immutability becomes like a judicial layer of the ownership of these assets. One of the problems we have today in all platforms, especially in games, is you don't own your assets. In fact, everything is permissioned. But with blockchain, you have this ability to have something that at least verifies your ownership. Like in the real world, if someone said, you know what, you don't own that car, at least you can go to the government or you can go to some higher power that can say, actually, you do own that. And this is where blockchain plays a role. And of course, we've all seen the benefits in terms of trading and value that we see with marketplaces. But the part that we are most excited about, and where we think the center of the experiences can go back to what we wanted to see with non-fungible tokens, and sort of where we think the web should go, is cross-application interoperability, which really is a fancy word to say that, you know, we want our assets to be interoperable. We want the assets to basically exist across multiple planes, because the center of the experience, in our view, should be the asset and not the platform. Like if you think about the game, in a game, the center of the experience is the game, and the assets only exist to support the gameplay, which is why the assets in the game are technically valueless. But in this world, as it should be, the assets actually are valuable, and the platforms and the experiences and the services that we provide around the assets become actually the services that support the experience we have with the assets. In other words, it becomes a strongly asset-centric experience. Imagine this, for instance, not that it's likely to happen, but if Fortnite suddenly made all of their skins available in sort of NFTs and exportable, how many other game companies today would choose to allow for the skins of Fortnite to be used inside their game, right? And we think everyone will do it because it's a way for the gamers, or for Fortnite gamers, to experience the assets in another environment, right? And for those of you who remembered playing games like World of Warcraft, you know, you may have stopped playing it, but if your assets could be used somewhere else, you would probably try that. So not only does it solve customer acquisition issues, it also allows you to take with you all the memories and history and everything around the assets that are in there. You know, non-fungible tokens to us are not just about manufacturer scarcity. It's about the kind of scarcity that you imprint through the experiences you deliver in the assets. Kind of like in the real world, like a wedding ring, right? A wedding ring is not in itself valuable, but by the time you pass it on to generations, or because on the memories attached to it, that particular ring becomes really very valuable, but maybe only to you. Most NFTs are not going to be worth $69 million, although that might be nice for some people. But generally speaking, it will be valuable only to a small amount of people, and that's priceless in itself. Like all the physical objects we have memories attached to in the real world, this is now possible with digital assets, and they can be composable and used in many open ways. And to us, open digital assets is the big future we want to see happen. It is why we make investments. It's why we don't seek to control, but we seek to invest and enable and empower what might look like competitors, because for us, open digital assets is the real end goal. And by that, I mean that NFTs to us will turn digital assets to what open source did to code. Right? For those of you who are old enough to remember, 20 to 30 years ago, code was centralized. It was controlled. It was only controlled by the big platforms, by the Microsofts or the Sun Microsystems. But today, actually, if you don't develop an open source, you are behind, because you cannot possibly compete with the brain power of tens of millions of people contributing code. The other thing is that the way the code was developed and the way it was reimagined by other people it's become powerful, because again, it's open to the entire community. So we think that NFTs are going to do the same thing to open digital assets. And I give you an example, for instance, in the real world, which is one of the reasons why commerce is so powerful in the real world, but doesn't exist in a digital world. The business of actually selling cars is infinitely smaller than the services and the businesses created that support the ownership of cars. Whether it's fuel, the construction of cars, whether it's hiring a driver, whether it's painting the car, whether it's making TV shows around it, right? All of those things are much, much larger than the ownership of the actual car, the sale of the car. But the reason why this works is because we do not need to seek permission. Once I own the car, I can choose which mechanic I want to hire. I can choose which person should paint my car. And entirely new businesses are emerging because of the ownership of cars, not because Mercedes or Tesla say so. But in the digital world, at the moment, 99% is permissioned. I can't take something from Fortnite and choose to change it. I can't even take my data from Facebook and offer any kind of alternative changes. So this is where open digital assets, we think, has to go. We need to take our assets as ownership to ourselves so that we can have other people create composable experiences on top of this. And we see this already today in services through DeFi, like lending platforms, for instance, or fractionalization services, or any other service out there. It's done in a permissionless manner. And so we think that this should happen to all of our digital assets. And this is not going to be growing the games industry from 150 to $200 billion. This is going to grow the industry into a multi-trillion dollar opportunity and basically create a new level of capital class and a new form of equity. The other way to think of this is that we are essentially digital serfs, right? Today, most of us anyway, except for those of us who are in NFTs and crypto. We are the liberated ones, I would say. But for the most part, all of us are in there. And when we talk to them about NFTs and about blockchain and how it frees our data and has real ownership, it's a little bit like this I guess I'm thinking of this Monty Python skit, but essentially going in and going to a peasant and trying to explain to them, actually, you should have ownership. That's kind of cool. And most of them don't actually understand that, right? That is essentially where we are today for the understanding of that. We don't understand the principle of ownership because we are ignorant of that. But eventually, when we become aware of this, there will be this open economy, this free trade, and this property rights, where this economic prosperity will just simply explode, right? So our strategy, just quickly in conclusion, has been, how do we bring not just the crypto community, but how do we bring people who are not in the crypto world into blockchain, right? So there are really two main strategies here that we pursue. The first one is, let's work with a lot of big brands, because people in the traditional world will at least have a emotional connection with that. And we've seen that succeed to a smaller degree with F1 Delta Time, but to a very good degree with NBA Top Shot and more brands coming on board. So we basically combine the brands, with a partnership with distribution and utility. We hope to deliver that. The other way that we do this with is skip that slide. Come to the next one. Is that what we also do is we acquire companies. We acquire companies who have actual users, gamers. And what we discovered is that it's very difficult to convince a game company to move over to NFTs and blockchain, because although theoretically we think they should understand, most of the game designers are by training and definition somewhat dictators. So basically they're more like kings, and they don't really like to be told what to do for the most part. So we figured that by acquiring game companies and essentially ousting the king, we can essentially create our own little revolution and turn them into a democratic, a sort of capitalist setup, which is basically what we ended up doing with things like Sandbox. They already believed in it, but we did this with other games that we acquired, and sort of open that up in that framework, because we don't have to pay user acquisition costs for these users because we already own them. They love the game already. And what we found is that once we give the gamers ownership and actually a form of capital, they actually love the game even more. So I think it's generally worked pretty well. The other thing is, of course, that the powerful thing about NFTs and why we love it so much as well is it's very social, because you're able to create a connection directly with the customer, even if it's sold 3 or 4 times, right? And I think we've seen this effect already in terms of the power of that, whether it's the artist, the creator, the game company, and so on. But also, you can make an asset experienced differently in different platforms. It could be a collectible, it could be a game asset. Nobody said that the F1 Delta Time Ferrari couldn't be an awesome horse in another game, right? That composability is up to the creativity of the person or the company who wants to make something out of that, because it's now truly owned by you, and you can do whatever you want with it. Or you can create experiences based on someone's ownership, because you do not need to seek permission anymore. So that's one of the reasons why we ended up acquiring as many brands as we could in the space. We have actually in total 300 IP that we've collected over the last 3 years. We were somewhat fortunate because 2 years ago, 3 years ago, nobody really wanted to sort of license anything in NFTs. So we just went out and basically tried to buy whatever we could for digital collectibles and NFTs. And of course, today, a lot of people are acquiring IP, but we have obviously a collection and a stable of this that helps us to sort of help deliver that in platforms like Quid, or with F1 Delta Time, we've got MotoGP. Actually, that's launching stuff on Flow. I think Sean and Matt can tell you a bit more about that, and so forth and so on. So maybe I would say maybe this is a good slide to sort of quasi end. and then maybe pass it on to Matt or questions or anything like this. Which is that, actually there's another one in here, which is Crazy Defense Heroes. This slide is a month old, so I didn't add that in there. But these are basically the real player economies that we have. And our goal really is to ultimately have at least one gaming category in the blockchain gaming space and NFT space. Meaning we want to have an MMO, we want to have an RPG, we want to have a strategy game, right? All games that we like that are going to be filling out this category. And it's an inclusive one in the sense that we know, just like in the gaming world, you can love many first-person shooters, you can love many sandbox games, you can love many action games. There will be many, because just like in the real world where we can live in many cities and enjoy them in our own way, we think of it in the same way because the economics actually work. You do not need 100 million people playing a game to be successful. It's good enough if you only have, 50,000 or 100,000 people play a game, because the economics scale accordingly, just like the economics you have in the real world. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's my quick overview of Animoca Brands before we go into maybe some specific products.
I'm so glad, happy that you're at the helm of all these beloved brands, right? And sort of shaping the whole ecosystem or space that is NFTs. And toppling a lot of kings. Definitely bringing the vision of those early days into fruition, right? We wanted to see this kind of not to use the same cliche, Ready Player One type universe, but it is essentially that. You have all these different projects and IPs that you bringing together under the umbrella of NFTs, and everyone is having a great time because of it. It's really, really cool to watch it happen in real time. One question that I had was, how do your peers, other founders and stuff, obviously they didn't get NFTs in those early days, which helped you acquire a few companies, but how are they warming up to it now?
Well, actually, you would think that with all the attention that many of them would be, hey, we should take a look at it. But actually, it's the majority are still not liking it. And in fact, we can see this as well, right? On one hand, within our NFT echo chamber, we of course all love it, right? But when you go step outside of that echo chamber, there's unfortunately still a lot of fear and concern, and maybe in some cases even hate, right? And while that seems, that certainly to me feels surprising, I actually experienced that kind of sort of cognitive dissonance back in 2010, 2011, when we started doing mobile games, right? And previously to that, we actually had a small business that was actually doing console and PC games. The people who were doing console and PC games were steadfastly refusing to go into mobile games for the longest of times. The screen was too small, it was a bad experience, nobody wants to play this kind of thing. It's an insult to me as a as a game developer, right? All sorts of things that not to do it. And if you also think about it, since the birth of Angry Birds, when was the time when actually the big game companies finally went into that? It was 5 years later, maybe closer to 6. And so the real calling was when Activision bought King.com, which were the creators of Candy Crush, for I think it was $6 billion. That was a signal of mobile gaming had arrived in a big way. But at that point already, it was very big already. It was just the big gaming companies that were almost forced to go into that. And I think the same will happen here, which is to say that the game companies are not going to willingly give up because they're making so much money already. Just take a look at the public balance sheets of these game companies. They're making billions of dollars. Why change what's working for the time being, right? And it's just like the feudal age. Which king willingly gives up the crown? It's not going to happen that way. So what's going to happen instead, we think, it's companies like us and others, including in our portfolio, who are going to be making these metaverses and virtual worlds. And the understanding of digital ownership will truly come to pass, where people will say, oh, actually, I own this. What does this mean? Oh, I understand all these concepts. And actually, it's more beneficial for me. Eventually, that will spread because we are socially and network connected. And there's going to be a mass immigration that's going to happen between the, let's call it, feudal games to the ones that are essentially more open, sort of capitalist style games, if you want to call it that. And they will have no choice, but because for their own survival, as we have seen in history, right? I mean, monarchies topple not willingly, but they topple for survival. And the same thing will happen here. we think.
Yeah,
Yes.
there seems to be, like, on the development in the gaming industry, this contrast of interest of the company and the players, right? Where the aggressiveness of the model is trying to be pushed as further as it possibly can. And at some point between like the 2000s, 2010s, free to play became a huge thing, right? Because it showed that we could have a competitive, fun experience without having to pay for it, basically. To have to pay was optional. And it proved that that could be, in fact, a more profitable model. So you believe that by itself, the free-to-play concept will prove to be an evolution of that, and even more profitable than that was at the time.
Correct. But I think the challenging thing was, and while free-to-play, we were one of the pioneers in free-to-play when we launched Pretty Pet Salon in 2010. And it really became super viral because we were one of the first companies that would offer a way to play a game on mobile anyway, and then you basically sort of for a small amount of money upgrade your characters and move on. And that was a great model for a couple of years. But by the time the business became very became larger, the industry became larger, the revenue amount that came in, the problem was that it necessitated for survival that business model become exploitative. By exploitative, I mean that we were trying as game companies, and all the big ones especially, to get more and more money from the players, except they were only going one way, right? It wasn't like there was any value going back. Mm-hmm. Effectively, we were looking at more ways, more methods in which we could sort of get deeper engagement so that we would pay more money. The thing to understand about the free-to-play business model is that the whale spending is actually not that dissimilar from whale spending in crypto, meaning that the top gamers spend tens of thousands of US dollars in a game where they actually own nothing. The game industry survives in free-to-play, of which more than half of the annual revenue actually comes from this free-to-play model, survives on an average conversion rate of 1.5%. Right? So when you play a free-to-play game, the majority of gamers never pay anything, which might be true for many of the people listening in, for instance, right? But how do you get to billions of dollars of revenue? It comes from just a 1.5% average conversion. Good games make 3 or 4%, bad games make less than 1%, but generally speaking, it's a tiny minority. So they have to extract as much value as they can out of the 1 or 2% that convert. To us, this is exploitative. This is a broken model, right? And it is one of the criticisms that the sort of non-free-to-play game said, if you design a game where it's free-to-play, ultimately, you need to create and sort of change the gameplay into a way which was different from sort of paying a console game where you pay $50 and you can have all you can eat in terms of the gameplay, right? It changes the makeup and the philosophy of the game, which is true, right? And I think putting in ownership rebalances that equation because now the benefits stream both ways, and you can actually have a symbiotic relationship between the creator, as in the game company, the owner, and the new players, which is one that you couldn't have in free-to-play before.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it has been somewhat proved. Let's say we have Steam and CSGO where players can kind of own the assets, but not quite. But in fact, they do kind of hold value, and because of that, people are more willing to spend more. More people are willing to spend. Right. They're not NFTs, but it kind of already proves the concept. And if they were in fact NFTs, if you were technically allowed to sell them, which you're not, you have to keep within the closed ecosystem, right? Maybe the willingness would increase even further.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect example of this is, if you look at the earliest OGs in this would be like companies like Second Life or EVE Online, right? But the milestone really, I think, especially because they went public, is Roblox, right? Roblox's market cap is, I don't know whether it's $40 or $50 billion. And it's a company that really is very similar to Sandbox, for instance, in this case. But in here, it doesn't have true ownership. 75% of what you make on Roblox goes to Roblox, right? It's worse than a tax in Sweden, so it's pretty bad. And I think this is obviously a semi-exploitative model as well, except at least they're paying back the users something, right? So effectively, Roblox is a halfway step. It is like and by halfway step, it also means that you cannot be fully engaged, because a number of people that can make a real sort of living on a platform like Roblox is limited because so little goes around. But with blockchain, when you change the economics around where you only take 5 or 10%, right? Then suddenly all that economic value, the substance there that is captured, is released to a much wider audience. You can now imagine, and as it has been with our own games like F1 Delta Time, for instance, or Sandbox, or particularly F1 Delta Time, you can actually consider playing these games full time as a real living and existing in a virtual plane for something that is truly sustainable.
Beautiful.
Yes. I know Matt wanted to take maybe a little deeper dive, maybe on something like F1 Delta or any other game that you seem to be actively working on, Sean. Matt.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sean, do you wanna kick off the kind of intro to F1 and Rev? It's your kind of brainchild.
One thing that I'd like to just jump onto briefly is that what Yat mentioned at toward the end there a little bit. So, and it's kind of like the concept of earning, right, through play itself. So what this is also doing, well, is that it's essentially coming into it's going to generate a new paradigm for esports as a concept as well, right? So esports has been incredibly hot for the last several years, but the problem is that it's just become so elite in regards to kind of how to enter it. So it's kind of a case of, if you want to play esports, if you want to be an esports person and you want to earn from it, then essentially what you're doing is you're probably 11, 12 years old and playing that game 70 hours a week, right? And you may not ever make it as a pro or in that tier of play that ever gets you any kind of winnings. But what we've got generated a different tier of esport where we have people who can have their life, their full-time job, their career, whatever it is, and then alongside it, participate and compete in gameplay and win prizes and kind of take home those winnings that they kind of, competed for and stuff. And like this current version that we have with F1 Delta Time, we're still very much kind of leaning towards kind of a casual experience of playing engagement. But there's something there where it's essentially there are possibilities for people to compete within tournaments that are accessible to them, that do not ask everything from them at the same time. And that's going to continue to grow. I mean, it's going to be very important for us when we build out the Rev platform even further. And we've got more than just F1 Delta Time there, and we have kind of MotoGP there available, ready to compete in, at Formula E as well, and the other titles that we're working on in the back. But this is something that's going to exist, and that itself is kind of going to be, I think it's going to essentially like the concept of esports that everyone was super excited for, but slowly it became more and more kind of impenetrable for a lot of people to really try their hand at it in some ways. So that's kind of another cool thing based on the fact that kind of this is an accessible kind of what play to earn can be, right, in some ways. And you don't need school and like all your hours consumed by it. So
a few people in the audience were asking, why isn't it just one token that kind of encompasses all of Animoca stuff? And my response was that they're very different genres, and already some tokens are interoperable between the different games. So I'm excited to see what Rev and all the other ones actually what they can become.
Yes, and maybe to elaborate on that point,
well,
I think that each of these tokens we view them as ecosystem tokens, not just to a specific game, but to a particular platform. So Rev is used for all the motorsports, right? In this case, it's not just Formula One, but Formula E and MotoGP and some other ones that we are signing up as well. because I think the design of the tokenomics is intended to fit a certain audience. But you can still swap them or trade them and make them interoperable between each other, as we have done with the swaps and everything around that. But the community may not necessarily be the same. There will be overlap, but the majority may prefer one game versus another, as we see in existing games. So it made sense to have separate tokens, but much like you have different currencies for different countries.
Awesome. I hope that answers some of our audience members' questions. So, Sean or Matt, do you want to do a quick...
just to quickly mention on that is that... Go for it, Matt.
Oh, sure.
You're the race driver. Go for it.
So, let me share my screen. Is that working now?
1 second. There it goes.
Cool. Yeah, that's my screen now. Sweet. So basically, so this is F1 Delta time. It is the pinnacle of our Rev Motorsport ecosystem. Rev being the token, the Rev token being our utility token for all the blockchain motorsport games, be that F1 Delta time, MotoGP, and later Formula E. So actually, just looking at this here, we had the first ever Epic event segment sale a few days ago, where we sold 300 Epic event segments, and that did extremely well. That sale alone, there were 300 segments priced at around 30,000 Rev each. I think it's a little bit more than that, wasn't it, Sean? It was about 33,000. 33,000. That sold out in 90 minutes. So that was equivalent of 9.9 million Rev, or sort of 3.38 million US dollars at the time, worth of, I guess, our motorsport land, which is quite incredible. So I guess going a little bit deeper into the game. The game itself is very heavily kind of reliant on NFTs. So just jumping into the garage here, you can see some of the NFTs I have. And to essentially get going with the game, you need a set of tires, a car, and a driver in order to actually get into the gameplay. So as you can see here, I've got all the different types of NFTs, drivers, some components, a few sets of tires, all with their individual stats. Some of these with the kind of triangular base is for the 2019 season of content, and then the circular base for the 2020 season content, which we launched a couple months ago. So I guess with my career, I never quite made it to the top, but with F1 Delta time, I guess I've kind of made it. Kind of a Formula One driver on the blockchain, which is pretty cool. So if we look into the work, yeah, I guess I've realized my dream. So thanks to Yat and Sean, I've finally finally made it to Formula One. So if we jump into the workshop here, this is where you equip your NFTs, and so I want to equip the car, which gives me a certain number of stats down the bottom, and as you sort of stack your NFTs, those stats kind of increase. And where that goes, essentially, so then to equip the driver as well. So you can see here the total team score is 5,200. If we jump into staking, Sean, do you wanna give a quick rundown on NFT staking?
I can try my best. Right. So this is something that you can only do with blockchain, really. Where essentially what we do is the NFTs, the very same ones that you can buy and sell, that you can own and that you will race, and Matt will race shortly, so you can see how that works. There is a way to essentially stake them, which means, for those who don't know, is that you're transferring them to another contract, and while you're going to be generating or accruing an amount of rewards based on it. So in our case with F1 Delta Time, what that means is that you stake a car, you are going to earn rev. The amount of rev that you earn is dependent on the rarity or scarcity of that car. Apex is the highest tier that we have, so that's going to have the biggest earnings essentially. And if you look here, we've got a considerable, so right now our car staking is currently only open to our 2019 season of assets, and we've got a considerable bunch of assets there. So just as a bit of non-legendary cars that haven't been staked based on what that says, and yeah, there's almost all of the epics there as well, and I think one apex is missing. But basically all of these cars are essentially earning rev right now. People who have staked, they are earning rev right now, so earning a little bit of rev as well because he's got some stuff staked. And again, this is the concept that you can only actually do with blockchain in a way that is authored and trusted in what's going to be allowed by it. And as you can see, there's kind of a considerable pool of rev left to be earned right, month and a half, I guess it is right now. We've already kind of allowed people to earn through the ownership. So through the ownership of game assets. So in another context, this could be a skin or a shield or a gun or whatever kind of abstract gameplay asset you want to kind of consider. A gameplay asset, through staking it to another contract, has basically allowed you to earn rev, and rev being a token, a value token that stores value. And right now, over the last month and a half, we've granted access to essentially like 4.5 million rev tokens for people to earn. So they've been rewarded through their ownership, through their engagement, the desire to want to play with assets that have these kinds of properties, that are NFT assets, that are kind of tokens. So yeah, that's a little bit about staking anyway.
So maybe I just want to add a little bit here, just to this element here, because the thing about staking obviously is the next precursor to rental of these assets, because these assets would then be owned by, sort of restaked to us, so that we would possibly rent them to others who can play the game. But the other thing is that there's what I think is some very fascinating game theory that comes into play, because cars that are staked cannot be sold. They can also not be raced. So, there's a considerable amount of pricing pool, and maybe Matt or Sean can explain, the kind of prizes you can get because the rev has appreciated. So the value can be quite high. But perhaps what's more fascinating here is that you can choose to race with your asset, or you can choose to stake for rewards. And it actually ends up leveling the playing field a little bit in terms of, do I want to take a more passive income approach? Do I want to take a more active income approach? And sort of adds to become a bit more inclusive from various forms of gameplay.
Awesome. So there's a real play to earn element of F1 Delta Time, and time trial is one of the sort of the playable games that rewards players for scoring well. So as you can see here, this is tier A, which is the top tier of assets. These are the cars such as the Apex tier cars, the legendary tier, the rare tier. Well, more so the epic tiers, and sort of the highest stats of cars. And so you can see a lot of our players, they set a lap time, and that lap time equates to a score. And at the end of the week, the top 10 actually get paid out in a certain amount of rev based on the tier itself. So I'll give you a quick sort of demo of the time trial mode. If we jump into here, this is the team that I built just now in the workshop. So I'll equip a set of tires. A set of soft tires. As you can see, it's dry weather, so soft tires are probably ideal. And you can see here my total stats is 5,979, which puts me in tier D. So that's in the kind of the lowest lowest tier. So then I can hit...
you have too much of an advantage to know what equipment to use.
It's okay. Don't trust Matt.
That's probably the best advice. Yeah. So as you can see here, we're at the Bahrain Circuit, and there's a little lap timer that's counting up, and based on your stats and based on your particular your setup, as you can see, there's some prompts on the screen. It'll tell you kind of, give you a few tips based on your stats and based on what components you've put on your car and your setup. It gives you a theoretical lap time that that depends on whether, for example, if you're racing around Monaco, a tight and twisty circuit, you want your car to be set up for grip and for acceleration, as opposed to for top speed, which you'd probably want at another track which had long straights. So jumping in here, that's actually not too bad. Finished 6th in Tier D. So then that equates to a score that will put me on the leaderboard. But because I haven't really been active, that kind of, I'm sort of nowhere. That's all right.
It's not bad. Not bad for out of all those players. Not bad.
Yeah, it's been a busy week.
Not all the players are professional racers, though.
Yeah, we'll edit that out. So we'll jump into the into kind of the meat of the game, and this is the Grand Prix mode. So as you can see here, we've got a few circuits that you can actually race on, and you can actually, there's a playable element to this, so an interactive element. So we've got the Bahrain Circuit, we've got sort of thundery, heavy rain conditions, we've got sunny, hot conditions. We've got the Shanghai Circuit in China, which currently only the hot conditions is available. We've got Monza in Italy. We've got Silverstone in the UK, and we've got Spa in Belgium, as well as Monaco. So because I've only got a set of soft tires, I'm gonna choose to race on a circuit that is currently dry. So let's pick Belgium, Spa-Francorchamps. It's a famous circuit, one of my favorites. So you can see here, I've got my team, so I'm going to equip the driver and the tires. And
have you raced on this in real life?
I have actually. I have. I raced there in F3, and oh my goodness, it is. If there's any kind of big famous Grand Prix circuit to race on, apart from something like the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, I think Spa is definitely one circuit that someone, if you can get a road car on there, if you can get even a Volkswagen Beetle on there, it's definitely worth it. It's an incredible circuit.
I love that these circuits are real life things, and people like you or big sports fans will understand that and kind of vibe with it even more on a different level than just the social player or the so that's cool. And yeah.
Oh, 100%. Like the whole idea of being able to own my cars and to be able to actually I managed to get to buy myself a rare segment, not an epic segment, but a rare segment of Spa. So to be able to say I own I own a piece of the Spa F1 Grand Prix event in F1 Delta time, as well as my own cars, is something that that means a lot to me as well. So let's see if this will load.
Cool. I love the whole DeFi integrations with this. Play to Earn has seen its fair share of development, but DeFi entering the space maybe not as much. How has that been? Because this is another level of teaching your audience what they have to do. Do you feel that most of them are understanding it, or that they get the possibility?
Sean, do you wanna jump on that?
The DeFi aspects, did you say?
Yeah. Yes. Has it been a smooth transition, or has it been a lot of teaching and letting people know why it's important and all that?
So what we have right now, and like we're not unique to this. This is kind of the scenario that we have. Everybody who's building blockchain games is going to have, is that basically there is guys who know crypto, right? There are crypto guys who, and then there's a segment of people who know NFTs, and they're not the same audience, right? I mean, obviously guys who are buying NFTs bare minimum they know ETH at this point, and they've spent ETH, and they probably, but they're not necessarily the same guys who are trading those couple of thousand tokens like those crypto guys are involved in. And then there's a gamer segment, a player segment, and then for us, because we're leveraging like the IP and stuff like that with racing and sports, right? So what concepts like DeFi do is that, yes, we are having to onboard or introduce certain concepts to people who are maybe familiar with NFTs primarily, but certain people who are interested in crypto, they might already. So there's kind of like a different path to introducing features depending on what kind of user profile it is. And I would say that like what we find is that when we do talk about kind of, because we've done a lot of stuff in regards to kind of leveraging DeFi to do liquidity. So there was kind of, an event that we wrapped up a little while ago now, but it was one of our cool ones. It kind of tapped into what we can do from a cross, like an Animoca ecosystem perspective, is that we basically had, if you add like Rev pair in a unipool, essentially, and then get the LP token from that liquidity pool and stake it to another contract, you'll earn a third token, and that third token can be redeemed for a very scarce, limited amount of fees, right? So that concept itself is kind of multiple steps to really kind of get around to understanding how it all works and stuff like that. But the thing is, because we have an audience that is interested in NFTs, interested in crypto, again, like they're not like the same audience necessarily. Audiences like outside of the education that we can do through our kind of, how we talk about these events, how we describe them and stuff, we find that our user base is our player base, and everybody who's interested right now does a lot in regards to kind of helping people on board to these new concepts as well. I think that's kind of helped us in when we've been talking about, when we do something like a liquidity event, or we do talk about, oh, this is Rev staking, or this is NFT staking. We've been kind of aided a lot by having kind of these diverse understandings of blockchain technologies, because they kind of help that onboarding process a little bit. It's definitely not there. Like, it becomes far more difficult to introduce someone who's like a pure MotoGP fan, for example, into a DeFi concept. But the thing is that once they learn, let's say if it's an F1 fan, right? Once that F1 interested in games at all realizes that, oh, this guy's won $2,000 from playing in this recent tournament, he's kind of going to want to learn how these DeFi concepts really work. They're going to put in that little bit of legwork to figure it all out. So kind of the incentive for people to kind of go through those extra steps of effort of understanding. But also on top of that, we find that like our communities are also kind of helping onboard each other to kind of these new concepts as well.
I love it. Very similar to what we do here at Whale. A lot of people were interested in NFTs or came on through the NBA Top Shot boom, and now are getting thrown all these different concepts and three-letter acronyms. So it's been fun. Cool. Let's see, Matt, are you loaded up, ready to go?
I am. So yeah, let's do a lap of Spa. So. Oh, the frame rate's quite low. I think I'm trying to do too much all at once, but we're coming through the last couple of corners, and it says boost. So you press space. So you're pressing the space bar to boost, pressing the down arrow key to brake there as the you see the little chevrons go red. So then coming up through this really famous section of Eau Rouge and Radion, using the up arrow key to accelerate, again spacebar to boost, as we go along the really long Camel Straight. So there's actually a lot of skill involved in this game. It's not just press a button and go. A lot of guys that are playing are consistently testing and practicing and racing and figuring out their setups to make sure that they end up with a good time and a good result and can put themselves somewhere on the leaderboard. So
Really cool.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the frame rate's quite low at the moment. I'm trying to. I've got my. I've got the.
You try
the call.
drop it down the post processing or detail. See if that works for you, Matt.
It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay, man. I know it's been a while since you've been on this track.
Yeah,
I have to blame it.
yeah. So yeah, I've got our stream up on the other. Oh, there you go. So that's what happens if you don't brake in the right spot. You end up nearly spinning out. So a little rookie mistake there, but yeah, as you can see, it takes a bit of skill and a bit of time to really get used to it. So I've been trying to put in the time, but it's not easy, I tell you.
You can't build and play. There's a delicate balance between the two.
Yeah, exactly.
This looks really cool. Where you can actually play, and of course, everyone knows that there's way more detailed games or like virtual reality racing now. But the idea, the whole package is that you own this car, you own parts of this track, and the experience as a whole is very, very cool, right? And I'm sure in the future, the graphics and things like that and the skill will increase. But the whole package is the idea and what's mind blowing about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's bringing a really kind of whole new angle on gaming and what you're able to do. And you see, a lot of our community members and a lot of our players are actually going on to OpenSea, realizing that, oh, maybe on this track I don't have the assets that I need. I need more top speed, or and they go trawling through OpenSea and find someone that has those assets for sale. And you see a lot of that trading going on. So it's it's extremely exciting, and it's a whole new way of playing games.
Sweet.
So something in addition to that, right, is one of the Rev Motorsport titles, right? So MotoGP is not going to be like F1 Delta Time. It's a different play experience completely. Formula E, likewise, is this different thing too. And then there are kind of concepts that we're going to be introducing into the larger platform, especially because within to really kind of do some of the kind of richest ideas within blockchain. User-generated content is some of its possibilities, and especially kind of when you want to talk about empowerment of different types of user and player. And that's also going to be part of what we do with Rev Motorsport as well. And that itself, and that whether it be through the play experience that exists for that, the editing and creation experience that exists through that, different type of way to play or engage with our wider Rev Motorsport ecosystem. So it's kind of like there's going to be a different segment outside of there being a different genre of motorsport that can appeal to different types of players, play experiences. There'll be management games, there would be arcade races, there'll be simulation races, there would be kind of track builders, tournament runners, anything that kind of people would expect within a motorsport environment and have seen translated is another thing that's essentially going to exist within Rev Motorsport, because it is a platform, right? There's a reason why we're utilizing a single currency, and it's not just for F1 Delta Time or just for MotoGP Ignition. It's for an entire platform of motorsport content.
I love it. I posted a GIF in the chat. It was same but different, right? So you're building different experiences, but there's similarities in the token and then the way that things work. So it's familiar a little bit to jump from game to game, right? One of the examples I give some people in real life is, you're really good at MotoGP, so you can kind of grind that out. Get yourself enough Rev token, and then you're like, hey, now I can buy a car in F1 Delta Time, and all you did was use your skills.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the future is amazing for what this can empower. If I can bring it back to Yat a little bit, because we are over an hour, and I want to respect your time and all that. One of the questions from the audience was, is this going to be mobile? And then I'll segue into the mobile thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in general, everything we do, the root of Animoca gaming history, starting in 2010, has all been mobile. So it's natural to expect that ultimately this will all come mobile. We have some mobile experiences already. For instance, with Crazy Defense Hero, we have a mobile game today that we're basically experimenting with play to earn and getting rewarded in a tower token. Quid is actually perhaps the best mobile collecting experience you can find anywhere at this moment in time, for instance, as well, right? So these are all things that we're already doing. For F1 Delta Time, I think the mobile component is one that is going to happen a little later. The team is obviously working on making this experience work on web and desktop first, but mobile is definitely on the cards for everything that we do.
Sweet. And touching on the mobile subject for a quick second, things on the App Store, be it iOS or Play Store. I know that early days you guys had a very crazy event, like being deplatformed basically on the App Store.
That's right.
I saw that recently. Now that things have changed and you guys do have your foot in the App Store, listings and all that. How have you been navigating this new realm of NFTs so that Google and Apple feel comfortable enough to have this listed?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe this is maybe a good segue for me, maybe to sort of quickly introduce, because it's very much related to what we're doing with Quid as a good demonstration. So maybe I'll just quickly share this particular window only because it gives you an idea. So quickly, just here. Oops, are you seeing my screen? Or I think there we go.
It's coming up. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. So Quid is an app you can download. So I can't show it on mobile, but go ahead and you can download it from the App Store or on Google Play. And in both of these cases, you can actually deposit cash from in-app purchase, and you can actually make transactions and then and buy these collectibles. Not all of them are mintable as NFTs, but all of them are treated as digital collectibles that you can spend externally and internally, as in the web as well as mobile. And this is the key part, right? The App Store and the platforms don't particularly care whether it's an NFT or not. They may care whether you use crypto, but they don't particularly care if it's an NFT or not. What they care about is that they get their 30%, right? That's the thing. And how do you give them the 30%? Well, the problem is in a model like this, as we've seen with new subscription services, is that when you pay a new subscription service and you have to give 30% to the platform, that might seem unsustainable. And in our particular case, if you were to put in cash and the platform takes 30% of the cash, and then the person makes purchases with it, it stands to reason under normal circumstances that we would lose that cash, and therefore we're constantly burning a hole and we can no longer sustain ourselves. But what we discovered with Quid is that you can make a deposit on the App Store, but as long as the trade of the assets has a healthy ratio, you'll still make money and make it sustainable, even if you give Apple a cut. Effectively, it's the same feeling, the same business model as if you're pre-selling essentially to the App Store for the right to be on the App Store, essentially these commissions. So the first 3 commissions ultimately go to the App Store. Every other commission thereafter becomes profit for Quid and makes it sustainable. And so that business model basically worked out economically really well. And now we've basically sort of embraced that model, where effectively, as long as you're happy to give the platform the 30%, then they're happy to have you, right? It's actually, and it's an economic relationship. And you know what? That's the heart of the fight that is between Epic and Apple, right? In terms of, is it fair that you take 30%? And should I not have the choice to have the company, in this case Epic, charge a different fee on the web versus a different fee on the platform, right? And do you have the right to sort of remove me as a result of that, right? That's a deplatforming issue that we have. But for the time being, we have decided to play with the rules in the way that is necessary for them. So, Quid itself, right? This is a thing. It has 7 million registered collectors. It has people that are trading on it right now. If you try it on the App Store, it has cash accounts that has ultimately led to an explosion of these assets being sold. Most recently, we did an Atari drop, so you can see these assets going in. You've got Marvel collectibles, Panini, which is the sort of basketball ones, Star Trek, and so on. These are all sort of trading at the moment, and they've got like the history here for these assets. Quid was something that was on the App Store for actually I think since 2017 maybe, or 2016. So it has digital collectibles that are really old. However, before sort of NFT as a narrative, where people were thinking, well, actually digital collectibles, is it just a gimmick, or is it actually something that could be truly permanent? Now it can, right? And people understand this, and thanks to things like NBA Top Shot, it has really moved the understanding, and in partial also because of things like the collector craze that happened during COVID, people spending more time virtually, people understanding blockchain more. All of that stuff has led to sort of this becoming now a sustainable model, because the commission you make, in this case 10%, is sustaining the business plenty, despite the fact that we have to pay 30% to the platform.
Amazing that you figured out the balance and what's necessary to keep primarily your company happy with revenue, and walking that thin line between being deplatformed and all that on Apple and the other stores. So I'm sure that this model will probably be adopted by many in the space, since it's clearly working. Quid is an amazing project.
Maybe just one thing to add, which I think is a model here as well in Quid, is you can play Quid today, you can make collectibles, you do not have to pay any money. You can pay a little bit if you want, but you don't have to pay any cash, but you can farm special collectibles, like the special editions. And then you can sell them to players. And so this is one of the reasons why Quid as a digital collectible experience actually has hundreds of thousands of active players, because it has people who do not have the cash necessarily, but they ended up farming the assets by playing Quid, sold it to people who said, hey, I want the 1/1, or I want that special collectible. And then they used the cash. Interestingly enough, the majority of them no longer seek to cash out right away, because now they've been empowered with some capital. In some cases, if you go on Twitter, you see people making, their first $500 or first thousands of dollars. They love this. They start buying back in, which is a narrative we have already seen with NFT and crypto art, for instance, and crypto collectibles too, right? It's a narrative we are familiar with, but it's not a narrative that people in non-crypto are familiar with. And that's the part that it becomes really beautiful with Quid, because it's literally bringing sort of Michael, the CEO and founder of Quid, expression of moms in Iowa, actually bringing them into this platform of value. And that's what's really powerful.
Yes, I've been playing or collecting on Quid for quite some time, and the experiences there are awesome. You can send messages to other users, acquire things for free, like you mentioned, with just the daily collecting coins and stuff like that. And then there are those things that you want to pay for because of the rarity or the number, or just I have a bunch of Star Trek stuff on there that I really value. And now that the cash system is in, I'm like, I'm actually thinking about it, because like I really love this item. So even with the cash system, I'm like, a cash system, I'm probably more likely to continue buying versus selling some of the stuff that I really like. So Quid, I recommend everyone in the community to check it out. It's a wonderful way to have those family members that are skeptical about NFTs to get a first look, and it's free. So definitely check it out. Gentlemen, we can talk about Animoca all day long, all week long, because 300 plus projects and properties that you guys own is an incredible amount. Me and Gian, we are very interested in playing some of these games on the Elite server. Elite is about to launch now on April 30th, and we would love if we can do some of these in-depth views over on the Elite server and kind of go through project by project. That would really give the community an idea more of how it's played, what they need to do, and all that good stuff. So I'm really looking forward to some members of the team kind of joining us there after this big universe overview, so that we can really go project by project. Do you or anyone on the team, do you have any things that you want to leave us with, or maybe a little bit of your view of the future, since you obviously seem to know it?
Well, I don't know that I could say that we know it. I think it's just more something that seems natural to us in thinking. So first of all, thank you very much. It was a real, I think, it was a real pleasure and honor for all of us to be able to present to the whale community. Maybe the thought that I'll leave us here with is in terms of, where do we think NFTs will go? And I think NFTs to us is the foundation for digital property rights for everything online. Whether this is a chain on whether this is on ETH or on Flow, whatever, to us that's almost secondary because we think the future will be cross-chain. But we will have relationships that are deeper in the social context because of blockchain, because every time someone owns an asset of another, we know how we're connected, and tools will be built that can illustrate that for us. What I also think will happen is, and this is really the vision we hope for that will come, is that ownership of digital property implies knowledge, right? You can't own something without knowing something. When you buy your first property in the real world, you understand how to buy, you understand what a contract is, you understand the mortgage, you understand the financial terms. You learn in that process and you become smarter financially. And with NFTs and digital property rights and playing play to earn, what we're really doing is we're creating stronger sort of fintech knowledge amongst everyone. And think about this for a moment. Most of the children go to college today and end up in debt, not because of the system, because they do not understand finances. They don't know what yield is. They don't understand the consequence of interest rates, and predatory behavior basically bankrupts a vast number. We've seen this problem. We know this problem exists globally. And that comes in large part because actually we do not teach our children anything about the real world in terms of value and finance. I grew up in Europe. In Europe, we didn't talk about money because we thought it was kind of dirty, and we, don't talk about money and that's not important. But then next thing you know, when you go in the real world, it's everything. And if you don't know about money and value, actually you get lost and maybe you lose everything. With NFTs and blockchain and people playing games and so on, imagine this: if our children were becoming financially savvy, which they have to, because they have to understand DeFi, they have to understand yield, and they have to play games and play economic aspects in this. By the time they actually go to college, maybe they have a portfolio, maybe they can pay for their education, but they certainly will not be fleeced by credit card companies. And it means credit card companies can't take advantage of them because we will have a broader financial education at that point. And if we live in a world where 99% of us have strong financial understanding and can invest responsibly, I think the future will be very different for all of us.
Wow, that vision is beautiful, and I can see that you're actively working towards that, my friend, and I'm here for it. I'm here for it. And also want to help this become a reality. Everyone in the whale community definitely leaves a little more savvy. Anyone now playing Animoca branded games can also do the same, and that's beautiful. Thank you very much for kind of taking that on, right?
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
Sweet. Everyone in the whale community and watching us out there in the metaverse, this has been another episode of Whale FM. Thank you so much for watching this project showcase on Animoca. The universe is huge, and we hope to see and deep dive a little bit more into each individual game and IP in the weeks to come. So stay tuned for more. Thank you so much, y'all. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right.